So I want to welcome everyone to this edition of the Nurses Station. I'm Lawana, the faculty member here at Regis College. And once again today, we have another amazing nurse guest with us. And I'm going to allow our guest to introduce herself.
Thank you, Miss Lawana. My name is Ayo Adebiyi. I'm a family nurse practitioner, but specializes now in occupational health. I work here at the University of California in Merced. And I've been a nurse, we'll say total of about 7-8 years, but totally in healthcare about 11 to 12 years. So it's a pleasure to be on this program. And I'm also the founder of a nonprofit organization called Care for the Unreached. And basically, it's an outreach-based organization that's pretty much humanitarian focused. And we address neonatal mortality in sub-Saharan Africa, but the bigger focus is Nigeria. And I've been doing that for the past 3.5 years now. It's kind of like a rollover from another project since college. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you with us. And hearing you talk about what you're doing lets us know why our schedules was hard to connect, because she's very busy. So we're glad to have a few minutes to talk. I'm always so fascinated, Ayo, by nurses, the people that are in nursing, the varied talents and backgrounds and different things that we find. And I find most interesting how people got to be a nurse. So tell me, for you, Ayo, was it something that you kind of fell into? Was it something that came naturally? Or how did your whole I'm going to be an RN nurse journey start for you?
Yeah, it's a whole it's a whole transition, and it wasn't something premeditated. And it's so interesting because I moved to the US in 2009, originally from Nigeria, and my previous background was in communications. So I went to college to study mass communications. Really love broadcast, maybe not so big on the broadcast end. So I love print media, and after I finished, I worked in kind of like a big newspaper organization in Nigeria. I was almost someone on the social sciences end. I love literature. That was just my gig. I love law. So my intention was, if I was going to transition, maybe I was just going to be a lawyer, because I've read so much American law fiction books. John Grisham, one of them. And I always found it fascinating, the jury system that the US had, because I was from Nigeria, the system was very British. So I was like, that is actually so fascinating. Fiction has a lot of accumulation stories into it. But fast forward in 2009, when I moved to the US, I came in to study international business at the time. And while I was just figuring that process out, which I still loved, I just stumbled upon a news on TV one day that was about some 20 weeks old preterm twins that was born at the hospital in Miami. And it just it's a different code on me. And the kids survived. They were just probably an ounce, less than a pound or so. And the fascination of the medical process was just astonishing. And they interviewed the parent on TV, and the mom was just acknowledging the nurses that were just amazing and just holding her through the process. And which for me, I came from Nigeria, I was born triplets, and I was one of three. And my mom lost 2 kids because there was kind of like some incubator issues in Nigeria. So it was such a very reflective period for me to just dawn on that process and just compare, just to see the vast difference in healthcare. I mean, these were years apart, but I just knew that was a gap. And I thought to myself in that moment, I'm like, if I finish this degree, I'm going to get in the US. And I mean, I love back home in Nigeria, even though I knew I could stay in the US, but it felt like my impact would be much more over there. I said, if I get this degree or one of you, there's so much people that have done the same thing I've done here in the US, and I will go to Nigeria and I would just be like another fun, came back from abroad kind of person. I said, well, if I actually go into healthcare, there's a gap that I would fill. And so all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, I gotta go into this healthcare thing. I wasn't a big fan of math. I just kind of thought it was so nerdy for people, but reading literature was fun for everybody. So that was how I just started my trajectory, I got a job as a CNA. And I always like to mention that, because sometimes people see your title after a while, but just to say it's such a ground up process. So
Right,
I
it
worked in
is.
a nursing home, ended up getting a job as a clinical partner in an ICU, just to really understand what that process feels like.
Right.
And I just, from there, was going to school at night, picking credits, figuring the whole process out. Almost feel like I have to start school all over again because I'm like, oh my God, I'm in classes with kids that just finished high school. Anyway, luckily I was
Right.
still young too. So I went to a community college in Miami called Miami-Dade College. I got my associate there and my bachelor's degree. And when I finished my RN program, started working immediately in the emergency room. So I've always worked in emergency room until I ended up working in ER trauma throughout my career. And after a few years, I left the I didn't leave the ER, just said, I need more degree, went back to school, and I went to UCLA for my master's degree. So I was a family nurse practitioner program, but also UCLA is one of the few schools that NIOSH funded to actually get a dual certificate and also become an occupational health
Okay.
person. So I kind of dual my nurse practitioner program. So I graduated from UCLA, both as a family nurse practitioner and also in occupational health. And it was just an area that was also fascinating for me. So my trajectory to nursing was in kind of a clear cut,
Right.
but I knew over the years that it was a journey that I had to take, and it was a
Right.
space that I had to be because there was a connecting cord there for
Exactly. Yeah. For you to be one of triplets and then to be able to now make a difference in the maternal outcomes, I know that has to have such a special meaning. How did your family respond to you wanting to go to nursing school? Had they ever had any inkling that you might have been medical in nature, or were they thinking more business, or what did they say?
No, I think I came from a family where the baseline, and I think this is very typical of African immigrant, especially Nigerian parent, you always know that education is pretty much the best
Right.
thing you can get to yourself. Now, what kind of degree do you get along the way? It might differ. And sometimes there's always, preferences, which they will say, just make sure you get a job that will get you a job,
Right.
and you won't have to live on us, that kind of thing. But they were just accepting of it. They knew
Good.
I decided to come to the US at 19. So my family were not even in the US. My parents were both in Nigeria and everybody. So they knew if I
Right.
was ready to take that leap of faith,
You could do
whatever I'm
anything.
going to navigate into, I'm going to really figure it out,
Exactly.
So
Perfectly.
I guess they were
So
more open to it.
I know. And I mean, like they're saying, if you're here without family, that's a challenge. And then, in a country where you speak English very well, but you have things that are so different here in certain ways culturally and even probably with the educational process. Did you find any particular challenges at all along the way with getting your education?
Yeah, I think it's actually so funny for me and coming to the US. And it's because when people knew I came from Nigeria, the first question they used to ask me then, looking back, they were like, how could you speak English? And I've always spoken English. And,
Exactly.
it was just the first reaction that I had, like, how could you speak English? And I'm like, I've always spoken English. And they're like, you're from Africa, but you speak English. And I'm like, so there is a lot of teaching that I had to do with even
Right.
friends just to understand where I'm from. And I found that a little bit shocking and surprising because I'm like, I thought this is America. I thought American people have access to more information because it seems like I knew so much about them that they knew about me. And
Right.
because even when I came, people will ask me, were you culturally shocked? And I'm like, actually, there's nothing severely culturally shocking to me because maybe I've been able to read books or see things that, that makes me have a slight understanding, but there were a lot of newness to it, the education. Or, when you write, I remember a particular time when I wrote an essay, it was my English literature class. And I didn't know they would make me retake the class because I was like, I showed them my transcript from college in Nigeria. I'm like, I've done English. I had a mass communication degree, and they say, "Oh, it's a college prep thing or something you have to do it." And so we had to write an essay, and the teacher came back to class and she was like, wow, your essay looks so fabulous. And I'm like, I didn't even put effort to that essay. But because I was really doing English multiple times over. So
Right.
again, it was a little bit surprising, shocking, almost even embarrassing at some point. I'm like, what does she mean my essay looks good? And this was like, well, I can't
Exactly.
even pronounce your name. So I kind of thought a little bit of things that I have to learn. And biggest for me was identity. Honestly, it almost seems like, because all of a
Right.
sudden I know that there's an ascribe identity. I'm from Nigeria, everybody's Black or something. So I've never
Right.
really ascribed myself as a Black person. But yeah, it
Right.
becomes very important that I'm being categorized
Mm-hmm.
some way. So that was
Yeah.
things that I had to learn. And it made me appreciate the access of
Right.
education here. Just
Mm-hmm.
that for someone like me, I struggle with math, but I literally have to self-taught myself pre-calculus. And I
Mm-hmm.
went to a college where there's a tutoring session. I could
Mm-hmm.
have access to those. So those were things that I owed very dear, and I didn't take it light. I was like, this is a privilege for me to do this, because
Right.
where I'm coming from, you either be super, super rich to be able to get
Right.
those, and
Wow.
have the access. So it was those things. But aside from that, I thought, it was
Yeah.
an overall interesting journey and just navigating a new culture and
Right.
system.
And these are good things for us to hear because we have a lot of students from all different backgrounds and different cultures that come to Regis as well, and in nursing in general. And so it's good to know what that lived experience is like, and to know that, to coming to America, and it's interesting that you knew more about us, because a lot of other cultures, I think, study about what it's like if you're going to come to America, what it looks like, what the things are like, the people are like. But yet, a lot of times we as Americans don't always look out, at the other countries and other cultures unless we encounter them here in America. So that's something to think about, that, even for us as colleges, that it's a good idea for us to be able to look into other cultures, maybe even form partnerships with other colleges to be able to see what is happening with the students there, what the culture's like there, so that have a better knowledge. So that's a good point. I love that. So talk a little bit to me about, I know you had seen the video piece about the twins that kind of sparked your interest in nursing. So how did that go so now you've become a nurse, you're out, nurse practitioner. How did you get to the process of forming your nonprofit, and what was that growth like? And I say that because a lot of times people say things, they use phrases like give back to the community and things like that. And those are cute phrases, but the work of doing a nonprofit is probably a lot different than most people would think. So talk to us a little bit about that, Ayo.
Yeah, it wasn't a smooth process, and because I kind of agree with you, because sometimes we see things, we see title, but I'm always in the big picture, that don't just tell me where you are, tell me the step that led you there. It wasn't something that opened overnight. I think this actually happened in college. When I was in Miami-Dade College, I had a professor. I mean, she was pretty much one of the few Black faculties that we had. And that was what the importance of representation really meant to me.
Yes.
And she was just amazing. Her name is Tina Turner. So because Tina Turner might hear this interview later, it was just so fascinating for me, because the only Tina Turner I've heard of was a musician. So
Exactly.
me going to college and having a Tina Turner as a professor, and she was really amazing. I mean, she taught the best pharmacology. I always think for nursing student, pharmacology is one of the toughest
Yes, it
class,
is
but
tough.
she had an ode of how to teach it, very,
Wow.
so she was someone I inspired so much to be like.
Yeah, if you love
And
pharmacology, she was awesome. Because
she was awesome. She was awesome. She gives you mnemonics to remember that. So,
hmm
and she just mentioned to me one day and said, there's this funding that I think I want someone to apply to, and I think I should get your attention to it. I didn't know what was it about. She just said, think about an idea that you would like for something to do and let me know. And at the time I was volunteering at a
hmm
school. It's kind of like a school for young girls that
hmm
had babies, young moms, but want to give them a transition to still get a high school diploma. So it was called Cope Center. And I was so fascinated by the idea, possibilities of things in America that happens. And again, that's one thing that happens when you go outside of where you are,
hmm
because I have comparison all the time. I think about what happens to teenage moms in Nigeria. That would be the end of the road for them. So just to
Wow.
see a school year that you can go, you go with your baby, there's a babysitter, and then you can have a degree. So I just started volunteering there. It was a community class and they asked us to choose a site. So I just fell in love with the students. We would talk about nice ideas. So she saw that I was so invested in that. And I would tell her about some of the things the students were telling me. To cut the long story short, so she said, you know, Ayo, think about an idea that we can pitch for this program and let's go with it. So I was thinking about ideas even for the kids. And that was around the time I saw the news of the 20 weeks old baby. So I was like, oh my God, prenatal mortality, preterm mortality, newborn. So I started going on research and looking at statistics. And I'm like, Nigeria still has the highest number. So I went to her, I told her, I said, you know, neonatal mortality is such a big issue. Maternal mortality is such a big issue. I said, but Nigeria still has the second right after India. I said, but don't forget that when we say second, we have to talk about the population. Nigeria has over 200 million people.
Yeah.
So you can see where that ranks.
Right.
I said, but things could be better because technologically we've been so inclined to a lot of things. I said, so I'm just thinking about an idea if we could actually even send incubators to Nigeria. And she said, oh, that was a fascinating idea. You know, you want to pitch that to the other folks. I'm like, is there other folks involved in this too? She said, yeah. So I went there and I told them. And that was actually the first time because one of the faculties asked me, said, why did you all of a sudden become interested in this? And at the time I was in the OB class, and I think if other nursing students are hearing this, and just to give them a sense of relief, every course you do in nursing school, this happened to me, you start diagnosing yourself within the construct what you learn. If you do in psych, you're like, oh, I think I have a multiple personality disorder. Who knows? You know, so I was doing OB at the time. So it was the right time. And we were talking about postpartum hemorrhage and things like that. So I said, you know, those were things that I'm learning and just seeing the access that women have here and that is not globally available. And I said, actually, personally, it's something that touches the heart for me. You know, it's one thing for you to read statistics. It's one thing for you to know that you actually, in some sense, part of the statistics too, because, you know, my mom had an experience and things like that. And that was the first time I would ever share. We don't share. Even my parents and I don't talk about the issue of losing. It's such an African thing where you keep your deep hurt a little bit. It's not. It's a way of protecting yourself. Technically, you don't talk about things that hurt you so much. So I shared it with them, and they all said, "Oh, that's a good idea." So that's how we ended up, and they said, okay, go for it. So it ended up being the Clemson Global Initiative project. So I applied for it, you know, so it was such a very big deal. I had a lot of faculty supporting the project. So I was selected as one of the few students around the world to be part of the global initiative on my idea was on public health, and the project was neonatal incubator for health. And so we got some donated incubator from the hospital. I was working as a CNA, just talking to them. And when I finished college and I continued the project, got incubators to Nigeria, the sustainability of that project was lacking in some sense, in the sense that the incubator wasn't the only issue. There was an education gap in between. You know, you could send a lot of equipment to a third world country or a developing nations, like I would like to use, not say third world country, and realize that there's some things you're leaving behind. Preterm birth not just happened. A lot of things led to them. So I'm like, could we really address those other things? And it was after leaving school and realizing that there's such a blessing to be a student. When you're a student, everybody listens to you. They kind of think you have this classic. But now I have an RN behind my name and they think like, oh, yeah, she's making money or something like that. So I just felt like, you know, went to Nigeria in 2018 after I had my daughter, and I looked at the idea, spoke to the nurses at the hospital in Nigeria, which was where my mom actually had us.
Wow.
Took me and my other siblings to, and discussed with the pediatrician, and the lady told me, she said, if you really want to make a bigger impact, the incubators are helpful. They said, but we need to go to communities where women education would have really bridged the gap for us. And I was an ER nurse, so I already knew what was happening where education was lacking from farm workers that I was working with in Miami at the time. So I said, you know, let's do it. What can we do? And she said, you really just have to get your hand dirty. You're from America, I know, you know, sophisticated, but if you can go to this community and actually discuss with these women and actually provide them education, we will make a whole lot of impact. And that was how the old project really changed to Care for the Unreached, which is what is it now. It was just me looking back and say, get away from the lofty idea. And I think it's always good. And I hope someone can be encouraged that you have to be open with your idea revolving, because sometimes you start with something, it doesn't mean that's the end goal of it. So I just kind of built on that project from college, and we started Care for the Unreached, changed it to Care for the Unreached, and changed the modality of the project. And what we do is just actually go to rural communities in Oyo State. Is actually one of the big city in Nigeria, and we partner with community health centers there. Because these areas don't have hospitals. There's not where you can have an hospital. You can have a small clinic, and you have what we call chews, which are just community health workers that are there, and we go there, we provide them with newborn care kits, diaper wipes, because there's a lot of factors that didn't make these women go to the hospital in the first place. Some of them don't even have what to take with them. And some of them don't even have the understanding of contraceptions, birth control, family planning, and how do you take care of yourself, both pre and postpartum? So that was what we've been doing for the past 3 years. And we've actually done about, I think, 12, 15 outreaches now, and, served every outreach of about 100 women and kids that come to those centers.
Wow.
So we do it very quarterly. And the goal is actually to use the nurses on the ground, because you have to be very sensitive to that. I always say, yes, I'm from Nigeria. Even when we talk about cultural sensitivity and humility, it applies to someone like me too, because I don't practice in Nigeria. Even though I speak the language, there's a difference in the way practice is done that really, really touch the chord of the people on the ground. So that's really Care for the Unreached in the nutshell, and how we got here.
That's an amazing story. And I love the fact that you're using the nurses that are there, because there's something about that trust and that rapport that the community has for them, that they would receive it more well from them than they would from someone from America that comes in and says, we're coming here to teach you. Because if you don't live here, you don't really know what it's like to be here, and then also because they're there and they know the circumstances of the women, there's not a judgment about, you didn't go to the hospital, you didn't do this, you didn't have this for the baby, because they understand the circumstances that they're in. So that is wonderful. Now, was 2018 the last time you were able to visit, or have you been back since that time, or how are you able to?
Yeah, it was 2018, 2019. I haven't been back. COVID happened. But the project really never stopped, and which is such the beauty of a global village, with technology access. There's a lot of planning. I wish I could go more, but the cost of travel sometimes is a restraint that I felt like instead of me flying there, the money would really, really let the mission continue.
Exactly. That's amazing. So do you find that you have is the training mostly just the nurses and organizing the classes to teach the moms, or is there a piece of it that also includes training for the nurses themselves, education for the nurses themselves as well?
Yeah, so that's a piece that we actually thinking, but I kind of thought that would take a lot of more collaboration. So what we've just done, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is how do we be a gap bridger? How do we make sure that the community actually even have the trust in the system that they have on ground? So we kind of think that the nurses on ground have the training and the knowledge of how to really do this. It's just how do we let the community come in? So, and that is how we become kind of like an augmented process there. Are there areas that I'm looking at in the future where I'll get expert? I mean, someone like you, I checked you out a little before this interview.
Did? So because I was going to say, if you need somebody to train on birth control, I do birth control
so that you need a lot of things training. So expertise like yours would definitely be things that, we look into. But again, too, we don't want to give them what they want. We need to listen to them and tell them how could we, in what area do we make us get better? And I kind of think that's one thing I'm trying to learn, because I've participated in a lot of missions and outreach. And one thing I'm trying to say is, if this is for my own people, I'm not just anybody from anywhere, just say, oh, I want to go do a feel-good mission somewhere. How do I not leave a gap? Because I'm not there. It's just not a one time thing. And I'm saying,
Yeah,
oh,
you want it to
bye,
be
take care of
sustainable. You
yourself.
want it to be something that's sustainable. And I mean, I can understand that. And I understand, with if we can improve the health of women and birth outcomes, we give children so much better start. And then with women being healthier, if the woman's healthy, the household's going to be healthier because the more we educate her about health, we're educating the household. And so uplifting everybody. And that's so amazing. I'm an old L&D nurse. So I was a labor and delivery nurse for, 10 years and have done women's health my whole 15, 16-year nursing career. So I love initiatives that help women and really empower women in the ways that this does, and with the respect and the grace that women deserve, because there's so much that they bear in addition to children, that happens in the household, in the community. And so having that, and I love seeing women support women, because I think men offer support, but I think there's something special about women, educating women and supporting women, that adds, to that. So I think that is such a wonderful initiative. So, I'm glad that we were able to talk about it. And so then in day to day, are you still like daily now in just practice there, where you are in California, as far as your day to day run?
Yes, yes. So I practice day to day. So my role changed. Now, I kind of handle the eye containment program. For my role is kind of in multiple pieces. I still do clinical process to deal with workplace safety and injury, but I also oversee part of our eye containment biosafety program on the research end. So that's some of my day to day work,
Okay,
which
that's
which I
great.
truly love too as
No,
well.
that's amazing work. And it's amazing because, like I tell nursing students, nursing can evolve and change so much over your career. And you can start out with bedside and end up doing something completely different, whether it's teaching, whether it's research. There's so many ways that we can contribute as nurses. And that's what I love about the education and about the versatility of being able to be there. And you're so young I mean, at this age, now I'm over 50. Okay. So I'm kind of in the set track. There are things that I'm going to do, but you at this age to already have been making such a difference in Nigeria, and then to be here in America, I just can't wait to see what it's going to look like even further down, because I know your mind is steps ahead. I can see that there's such a brilliance there, and I look for that too, because here in America, the fact that we're a developed country, we have some pretty not so good outcomes maternal
Oh,
wise.
oh
I'm gonna
yes.
just
Tell
tell
me
you, if
about
you're
that.
looking for a safe place, this is not the safest place in the world to have a baby, and
No.
particularly for brown
Black.
skinned people, it
Yep.
just isn't. And so, there are things that we need to do differently, even here, in the healthcare
Yeah.
system we have here, to be able to make some differences in our outcomes as well. So, but knowing that there are brilliant people like you out there gives me confidence and hope that we're going to get there. We will.
I
So,
hope so.
I know that we will. So I'll tell you, Andy will also, when we post the story, put the name of your nonprofit out there, and it's Care for the Unreached.
Yeah.
And so, what is your website? Do you know
Yes,
what your web address is?
there's a website. I can send that in an email
Okay,
to
great. So yeah, we'll
well
make
to.
sure that that's posted so that folks will be able to keep track of that. And then we also want to keep track of you and what's going on with you. So we appreciate so much you being here with us today.
Thank you so very much. Really appreciate this, Miss
Okay.
Brown.